Nobody drives in Brooklyn? We're chatting with filmmaker Ben Wolf about his new documentary, Changing Lanes. The film captures the intense community battle following efforts to reconfigure a Brooklyn street in the aftermath of a deadly collision. Changing Lanes will be screening with Ben in attendance and other guests across LA from April 16th through the 20th at different Laemmle theaters. Eric, Ivy, and I are going to the screening at the West LA Laemmle Royal at 7 p.m. on Thursday, so stop by and hang out. It can be a last-minute surprise meetup. The screening on Monday at 7 p.m. at the Santa Monica Laemmle will feature Santa Monica Mayor Caroline Terrosis. We recorded this at the LA Public Library Pio Pico branch in K-Town, and Ben zoomed in because he's not in LA yet. How did you get here to your current transit activism place, and how did you get to your recording space? What's your transit profile like?
All right. I would say I actually maybe don't consider myself exactly an activist. I'm a filmmaker and someone that has lived in New York since 1991. And since I've been here, I've gotten around through all modes of transportation. I love cycling, and that's been maybe my preferred way to get around, but it really depends on weather and quality of the infrastructure in the area where I'm trying to go, and also whether I need to bring camera equipment with me. I'm professionally mostly a cinematographer, and often I have to bring quite a lot of gear with me, and for that I use a car when I have to. It's not, it's kind of the only reason to do that is because I'm bringing a lot of equipment with, because it's a very expensive and slow and frustrating way around to get around this particular city. I used to race bikes. Nowadays, I mostly just get around on bikes, and it's something I love, and it's been fun to see it go from being a very kind of outsider activity in New York when I first came in the 90s to now where it's really quite commonplace. I'm also somebody that travels a lot for work, so I've seen cities around the world, all the different ways that infrastructure can be organized and how seemingly superior it is in a lot of the developed world, a lot of Europe and Asia, for instance. So it's exciting when we see bits of that sort of style of infrastructure coming here, and I really hope to see more.
Yeah, I guess as someone who's I wouldn't describe myself as a cinematographer, but as a, videographer, editor type who is car free right now. I very much know the struggle of trying to get around on a bike with a camera full of equipment, a back rack full of tripods, full of audio stuff. And it's been an ongoing task over the last couple of years for me to adapt my kit to, one, fit on a train, two, fit on a train with a luggage Pelican case, fit on a Vespa, fit on a bus. If I were smart, I probably would have a car to do that kind of stuff, but I love a good challenge, so here we go. And funny enough, too, I had a work trip out to New York, I want to say in 2022, that convinced me to get out of my car altogether. I was working for an art website at the time, and my client's boss did not book any sort of rental car or other stuff. So it's like, great, Kyle, you're taking the subway. Well, okay, great. Here we go. And one of my hard drives died after I filmed the first day of stuff. So I had to spend the entire night. We were filming art classes with a well-known watercolor painter in New York. He was in Midtown. And so the whole night I'm just flying around on the subway to every electronics store in the city, trying to find one place that is open that had a hard drive that I needed. And from doing that, it was like, oh, wait, I get it. This is awesome. And, so my New York trip just killed all of my, my desire to have a car once my car actually died. About your film, what brought you into this? What brought you to this film?
Well, as I said, I do have this sort of fascination with how you get around cities. That's just been something I've been interested in. As a cinematographer, I've worked on lots of other people's documentaries on all sorts of subjects, from making Steinway pianos to writing obituaries, debates around autism, you name it. And I've loved that you get deeply immersed in these different subjects that you may know nothing about. At any rate, I had wanted to direct my own documentary for a long time, but was generally just too busy and exhausted to do it. And then the pandemic struck, and suddenly I had a lot of time. So I started searching for a good story to follow that was a local story. And I thought, okay, the waste, there's obviously a lot of controversy around changes to the street, and that would be an interesting thing. So I started, and also I wanted to do something about politics, because I think, like maybe most Americans now, I'm sort of preoccupied and with this sort of feeling about that there's something wrong with the way our politics is functioning, that's sort of keeping us from really making progress on any number of fronts. So anyway, I started searching for a story and was following a few different things relating to transportation, like the congestion pricing and some other street projects. But I stumbled into that meeting, which is featured in the film, where the folks that were opposed to the changes on McGuinness Boulevard, they held what they claimed was a public meeting and then proceeded to lock out the people that disagreed with them. And I thought, this is really over the top. This is drama at its purest. And I thought, okay, this is probably the story that's I'm going to be following. And so I followed it for about 3 years. I was very lucky that the story ended up being such a dramatic story with interesting, surprising twists and turns that I don't want to reveal all of right now, but and ultimately a happy ending, which most of the time I didn't expect would ever happen. So, luck is always a big part of documentary filmmaking, because you really don't, if you're telling a story in the present, you really never know exactly how it's going to go. I did want to add, relating to our earlier conversation, that I say this at the beginning of the movie, that I did make this movie without using the car that I would have normally used. And that was sort of a personal challenge I set for myself. I thought it seemed appropriate for a movie about getting alternatives to cars to try to see if you can actually make a movie. Also, gear has been getting smaller in the 25 years I've been doing this, so I don't think it really would have been possible up till maybe a decade ago. And then suddenly I was like, maybe it is possible now that I can get a little trailer behind my bike and fill it. And because the street that is the subject of this movie is only about 5 miles from where I live, it wasn't like an unmanageable thing to come and go. So I did it. I made the whole movie, basically towing the gear around on my bike. Again, you couldn't do a lot of projects this way if it were further or if you had to move quickly. But because I shot over such an extended amount of time, typically just like 1 day a week, it was something I could manage.
That's awesome.
The shots, especially outdoors, are really pretty too. So it's from just a film standpoint, it's interesting that it's like so aesthetic and it, it's not like shot on an iPhone or something.
Yeah, well, I guess this is the benefit of my normal career, which I think.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense now. Exactly.
And I did think that it would be that streets are visually interesting things, and that trying to capture streets, both the sort of design, which like drones were very helpful for those sort of overhead perspectives that really let you see things that you might not see on street level, and also the challenge of giving the viewer maybe the feeling of what it's like to be a pedestrian or a cyclist, like weaving through traffic. And I got to use a bunch of new, interesting little cameras and whatnot to help capture that, which again, it would have been quite difficult to do it until recently. And now getting those kind of shots has become a lot simpler. So I used a variety of different cameras and tools, but which was fun, and sort of picking the one for the, each, what I needed to do in any given scene was an interesting challenge and fun, a fun way to use the new technology that's become available.
What's your favorite bike cinematography tool? I
do love drones, as does everybody, but the new tool that I only picked up on this was the 360 camera, the Insta360. I don't know if you've played with that, but it's amazing. It's a tiny little camera that you can mount on a little stick, and it's shooting in every direction at once, so, and then in the edit, you choose, do I want to look, like if I had a way to mount it on the front of a bike, like I put it on the front of David Byrne's bike, and then in post we could shoot David, or we could shoot what he's seeing, or we could shoot side view, you're capturing all of this stuff. It's like you rigged like 5 cameras, but it was just one little thing on a little stick that you put on in like 5 minutes. It's just amazing.
Well, speaking of David Byrne, it was funny that the term talking heads comes from like a type of thing that happens in documentaries. So sometimes when I talk about talking heads in documentaries, people are like, if they're not film school people, they're like, what? Are you talking about the band? And this is the first time where it's been like, well, both.
Yeah.
It's a talking head and it's
a talking
David
head.
Byrne.
That's true.
One of my thoughts was, and it kind of comes up in the film, is you said that you've traveled in cities in Europe and Asia, and that's kind of made you see what's possible in American cities. But I was wondering, hasn't anyone ever told you like New York isn't in Europe or Asia?
That's true.
Because we hear that all the time, And it's actually one of the things about the film was just hearing this sort of, some of them are made in good faith or just bad arguments. A lot of them are made in bad faith, but how they are exactly the same wording that you hear in any city, which is kind of funny because if someone's saying like, well, New York isn't, Paris, New York isn't Amsterdam, and the list grows. It's like New York isn't Tokyo, Utrecht, Copenhagen. It grows. But then at the same time, it's like, well, if it's not all those things, it's funny that we make that same argument that this city isn't that city in every city, because that's exactly what they say in Los Angeles. And you could flip it and say, well, it's also not Manila or Karachi or cities that have really kind of tried to squeeze more cars into every square inch and not worked, not succeeded in making a traffic-free city. So
yeah, I think Jeanette Sada-Khan says in her book, that she heard all the time, "This is not Amsterdam," which it seems to be the most common refrain. But again, if this is usually just a weak excuse for people that haven't done their homework and don't really have a reason, so they just throw that out there as though it's saying something. But the truth is, if you look, like Amsterdam wasn't the Amsterdam we know today until they decided to become the Amsterdam that they are today. They were a car-dominated place too. So
until like the 70s, right?
Yeah. So this is all kind of nonsense. And what's particularly funny, also, like in my movie, that Emily Gallagher, the state assemblywoman, says that New York City is incredibly provincial, which is true, because it even happens on the local neighborhood level. People are like, well, we can't do that on this street in my neighborhood. It's like, never mind the fact that it was done a mile away on a different neighborhood and worked fine, but somehow you think there's something so special and different about your neighborhood.
But it's exactly the same way here too. I was nominated to my neighborhood council, and if we mentioned one neighborhood over, people would stand up and scream like, Silver Lake is not Echo Park. And I was like, what point are you trying to make? Are we too stupid to make work what has worked everywhere else? That's what I always want to know. Like, why do you think we can't do what everyone else has succeeded at doing? And I guess you could ask that about bike lanes in New York City and every other city too. Like, my counter question to those people, I don't know if you can answer for them, is like, well, what do you think about us is different that we can't achieve what everyone else can?
Yeah, I don't. Well, and again, as is also said in my movie, people also want to always say that we're the best place in the world and the most exceptional. So it's odd if we're so great that we can't do what's been done, in other places. Again, I don't think these are really these are not real arguments. These are just, people that just don't want to change. And that's fine. I just wish they would just be more upfront about, okay, you just don't want to change. That's fine. But don't tell me it can't happen. It certainly can. I think all of these fights are much more about political will than really about what's possible. There's another quote in my movie. John Orcutt says, in talking about some of the infrastructure that's been done here, that it's not Amsterdam, but he says, but the same rules of humanity apply. And I think that's true. It's basically the fundamentals are the same. And in any place, you're trying to move people through space and in a variety of ways safely. And, exactly how you do that. I mean, the plus side of having, or that's interesting to me about urban transportation, is that there are so many cities in the world. And rather than saying, oh, what we can't do, I think it's really amazing that you can look at cities as like laboratories and see what are all the different approaches that have been done and which ones do you want to emulate, and what, because you actually, it's not just pure mental speculation. You can actually go to places and see. And I hope that to some extent my movie helps, a virtual version of that, where you get to see what's worked in different parts of New York City and also what's worked in some other cities around the world. And maybe what hasn't worked, but at least you can see it, and it's a real thing. It's not just somebody, having some theoretical argument.
Speaking of the differences and the arguments and stuff like that, I know there was a clip in your film where you showed the activist team interviewing people on the streets and asking people their opinions on the proposed changes, and some of the people are very outright against it. I was wondering how was it going about asking them for their permission to be recorded if they were opposing your cause, and maybe what was that like, incorporating the other side's perspective into all this? I
mean, there were a few people who said, I don't want to be photographed, and that's fine. I didn't do it. But broadly speaking, there were sort of three groups here. There was the sort of advocacy community, and they were like super open and like, yes, we're having this event, come and shoot it. We want to talk. And again, I'm not an advocate, and I didn't present myself as one. They were just, I was saying, I'm making a documentary, and they were like, cool, we want to get our views and story out. There was the people against the change, most of whom were not very open to, there was more of a paranoia thing going on, I think. And I do think it's important to state that I think there are reasonable, decent people on every side here. I'm not trying to reduce this to good guys and bad guys, but I do think one side was much more open and the other side was much more suspicious of me and thinking I had some ulterior motive or that I was trying to make them look bad or whatever, which I really genuinely wasn't. And the third group, which disappointed me, was the actual the Department of Transportation. While I was able to talk to lots of important people who had been in the department in previous administrations, like Jeanette Sada-Khan being the number one, the current government was not open to being part of a documentary. And I took that as a sign that something was sort of amiss in our city government. Because I think, again, I tried to say overnight, this is not an attack piece. You're not going to give me anybody to talk to. Like, it's just not a possibility. You're not, I can't shoot a traffic engineer at a computer laying out I just really wanted something. And they were just, at times it wasn't always a hard no, but it was never a yes. And it was frustrating. And I felt that was disappointing. And I would guess, I hope that under the new administration that they would probably be more open. I think there was a general sense that something was amiss, and I think they were a little embarrassed by, the fact that they were making good plans that then they weren't allowed to execute and all. And it was just, I think that they had a mindset of we just have to like barricade ourselves in and not, they didn't want to have to talk about things that were problematic, but it was disappointing for me.
This was all filmed during the Eric Adams administration, just to clarify. Essentially. I mean, at the very, very last moment is you see Mamdani, and there is footage of De Blasio, who was the previous administration, which was existing footage that I didn't shoot. And then, of course, we have archival materials going way back.
I wonder if this is just a characteristic of, local government stuff, because we recently, there's a lot of excitement in LA right now about the opening of the D-Line extension. And of course, like the hot topic is the Ride the D shirts that Metro put out.
Mine is coming today, apparently.
Oh my God.
Congratulations.
Yeah, Metro released these t-shirts, then that is their slogan for the new D-Line extension. And apparently, some tell has been like that Metro as an organization is not particularly excited about how popular this campaign is, though it is their most talked about post-merch campaign ever.
Yeah, I think they said this is the last run on the shirts. They're like, this is your last chance to get it because it's so popular, we're not going to make it anymore.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's a weird city government thing that like you can't channel excitement or you can't channel civic goodwill. I guess
everyone has to approve at every level, everything, and it's just I don't know, because I know there are individuals in the DOT and Metro who, speaking on their own behalf, have opinions that are align, even Caltrans, that align with our values, but then a lot of times they can't speak on behalf of those organizations.
So I saw that a lot here because I did get to meet a few of the people that work for the DOT who wanted to talk to me, and they were like, but I need to run it up the line. I can't do that. And then, it would always get to somebody and they would say, nope, sorry, it's not happening. And again, it's just not a good sign. It's not a good show in a documentary. Sorry, in a democracy. To me, it's fundamentally undemocratic to be closed in that way. Again, I would think these places have a press office. They have, allegedly, they are, give me somebody, a spokesperson, something. And I don't know. I just felt that the fact that wasn't happening was a sign of something wrong, of something being wrong, honestly. And also, I just wanted to say, I grew up in LA, so I know it pretty well. I grew up in
great.
What neighborhood?
In Los Feliz.
Okay.
I'll actually be, flying out Thursday for my theatrical premiere that's happening starting Thursday night.
We're excited. I taught my class before this, and I told them all about it. So hopefully some of my students show up.
That would be great.
And when did you leave Los Feliz?
I left in 1987 when I graduated high school to go east for college.
Did you go to Marshall?
I did.
Okay. It's a beautiful high school.
It is.
I've actually found a student ID on the bus, and that's why I had to go to Marshall, was to return I was like, I found somebody's student ID on one of the buses. So I felt very creepy walking onto the campus
No,
as
but
a
it means
grown
students
adult.
are taking the
Not
bus.
a teacher. Yeah, exactly. I see lots of kids on the 182. That's the bus that I took to get here. Well, it'll be interesting for you to have your perspective of having been away for so long, because I do feel like they've made the area along Vermont, they've kind of made that it's become more walkable, I think. And then but at the same time, they've talked about closing Hillhurst to cars, which is not, it's not the street let's just say it's not the street as it is that I would rather like walk down than compared to Vermont, but that's getting very in the weeds for like neighborhood stuff.
I guess compared to McGinnis Boulevard, do you think there's anything analogous to that here in LA?
I get back a couple of times a year and usually stay with family in Glendale, and I keep a bike there that I do ride around, and it's my general experience is it's not great. It's not great.
People that are familiar with Glendale will not be surprised.
Yeah, but even Los Feliz, none of it feels great to me. Sometimes there's some painted stuff on the street, but I've rarely seen like hardened, the kind of thing that I think is necessary if you're taking bikes seriously. And so, if it's a quiet street, that's fine. But if there's cars, it just doesn't feel very welcoming in general. That's my general feeling.
It is one of the reasons that when people say like, but this LA isn't New York, LA isn't this, LA isn't that, when we go through that whole list of cities. But one of the, for better or for worse, I would say mostly for better, like Los Angeles does have its eyes on New York. So it does seem like if something happens in New York, a lot of times it's like, okay, if you can have a Democratic Socialist mayor, that's really when people started talking. Now we have 2 Democratic Socialists running for mayor, and we're going to be interviewing one pretty soon, one of the candidates. So, I don't know. Like, I think it's heartening to it's frustrating that we have to wait for New York to to do it first a lot of times. But once it happens in New York, it does become more normal here eventually.
I think a lot of people in LA like to romanticize New York, because you have density that we can't even dream of. And obviously from what happened on McGinnis, there are a lot of places in New York where cars are still, dominate your streets. It's still dangerous to get around on a bike. So what's your perspective as someone who has been biking around New York for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, the difference with LA and New York is that in New York, most people don't have a car. That is true. But and it makes it odder that we gave up in the 20th century 100% of the street space to something that most people never had. It was an odd choice. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. At this point, it's still only something like, I think it's something like 2% of the streets have actually like hardened bike infrastructure on them. It's still a pretty small amount. It's some of the most important streets in the city, some of the main avenues in Manhattan and whatnot. But when you get to like outer boroughs, it's a lot less. So I think it's weird because right now, I guess part of knowing how to get around the city on a bike now is knowing what the good streets are and adjusting your route to take those specific streets to get where you're going, which might not necessarily be the most direct way to go where you're going.
That is interesting, though, because I think that was the point in your film as well, where a lot of the more car-oriented people know the streets that have good parking or the big parking lots and stuff. But we can be like that, too, We know, what's good for transit, what's good for bikes and stuff.
I mean, you have to, on the one hand. On the other hand, with a bike, going, several miles out of your way is a bigger problem than maybe in a car going a little bit out of your way. It's it's a little frustrating because I think we made such big strides under Bloomberg and Jeanette Sadik Khan, but we kind of left the job half done, and then instead of moving, keeping that momentum going over the last 10 years, it sort of stopped. We're like halfway to being like a European city. Like McGinnis now feels like that. It's like, okay, this is great. There's a real serious, safe place to ride a bike and still plenty of places for, areas, room for driving and nice pedestrian medians and everything. I would obviously, it would be nice if that was done more systemically. The hope, which we all have right now, is that Mamdani is sort of getting us back into that serious, let's take this problem seriously and address it systemically and not such a piecemeal way that it's been done. I'm going to remain optimistic until I have a reason not to be.
Well, I think it makes a good argument for hardened infrastructure. New York, just in general, because Los Angeles used to have kind of famously the largest interurban rail system in the world, but that's easy. They just paved over those tracks that are account for most of our wide streets. They were just cutting to put in new bus stops on Sunset. And when they cut, the guys cutting were like, oh, we hit some rail lines, and they were like, oh, I guess we're going to have to like come back tomorrow. We didn't bring all the tools for that. It's like, it's just this forgotten thing that we just paved over. It's a lot harder to justify like filling in a subway tunnel or something like that. And for like bike infrastructure, when you just paint lines or put in plastic bollards, it's easy for a new city council person comes in, there's a bike lash, and then you just rip that out. But if you have concrete infrastructure, it's like, and people get used to it too. I mean, in Silver Lake, there's a triangle plaza, the pedestrian plaza, that was created by getting rid of 9 parking spots and painting some polka dots on the ground. And now people love it. But at the time, people were commenting to the neighborhood council, like, the sky is going to fall. Like, traffic's already so bad, we're going to get rid of 9 spots. And now that it's been there over 10 years, nobody talks about it anymore. No one even remembers. No one says, like, we need to bring back parking to Olvera Street, because that's how Olvera Street was created, by getting cars off of Olvera Street.
So my favorite feature of plastic bollards, and I live in downtown LA right now, and on the corner of, I believe it's 5th Street and Spring. Anyway, there's one of the corners that are on 5th where there's bollards going around the corner from the 2 protected bike lanes. And if you're driving past it, you can just run over that plastic bollard with your car. And hey, it's just like a regular lane again. Wow.
Because we don't want them to like mess up somebody's car. It's so ironic.
There's also the great Uber technique too, where I've seen people in downtown run over the plastic bollards to just park right there and drop off their rideshare people and go on their way. Yep, it's great.
Flexible delineators. Those are the even less, the flimsier ones that are, it's right there in the name. They're flexible, and they make a line and say, like, you can't park here. So in front of Erewhon, the food gig delivery people, they just kept driving over them until they all just got ripped out. And then it's like, problem solved.
I appreciate that they're there, though also just maybe like the corner ones put something in hard to just tell people to not.
Well, it's not like they don't have stone bollards and metal bollards. I've seen them in movies from the 60s.
I mean, all of these things they're good temporary measures, but they're not they're not the full implementation.
And riding your bike on a painted bike lane when cars are going like 65, like past Forest Lawn, it's terrifying, even though you're like, but I have a line.
I mean, it would be interesting to see the data on it. My sort of subjective feeling is when there's simply a painted line that it is not doing actually anything, like zero. Yeah. It's kind of a lip service. It's almost sort of an insult, like, okay, you're acting as though you've addressed something and you haven't.
Right. You're patting yourself on the back, like, look, we did what you wanted and no one's using it, so let's just put it back.
Yeah. The problem in a place like LA, I have no doubt that if you had leaders who really aggressively improved infrastructure for bikes and pedestrians, that over time those things would be used. But it would take time. The thing in New York, you already do have hundreds of thousands of people doing this thing. They're taking more risks with their life than they should, and more people would like to be doing it than are because of safety. But there's already this sort of, I would say, sort of critical mass of people that are, sort of chomping at the bit to take advantage of these things, where in LA, maybe it's not quite as much. And so I understand politically, it's a little harder to sell something where you don't have this constituency, maybe a large enough constituency clamoring for it. I could be wrong, but that's my general impression.
No, I think you're right. And I think also just that there's an inbuilt alternative to cars in the subway. So the first time I went to Manhattan, my sister, she was going to school in New Jersey, and she kept taking. I was like, can we go above ground at some point? Because I feel like a mole person. I was like, can we just walk from this place to there in Manhattan? She's like, no one would do that. You can just take the subway. And like people, so the idea that the subway's almost too good. I mean, I've had that experience in Seoul and Tokyo too, where people are like, why would you walk from here to there? Like, you can just take a train. Like, you become so dependent. But it does put in, it's an alternative in place to driving. So maybe people are more open to, here's another alternative to driving. Because everything here is framed as cars versus everything else, And it's like, why do you want to take away my cars, what's rightfully mine? And when you tell people that, oh, this street was actually built for a train, a lot of times like Brand and Glendale, they're like, oh, really? I didn't know that.
Well, and again, to me, the big difference is, again, in New York, most people don't have a car. So they just, that's not even a thing. I mean, they might take a taxi sometimes or an Uber, but they're probably walking or taking the subway or the bus in general. They're not, they're not getting in their car. They don't have a garage. They don't have a car. It's just it's fairly unusual in the United States, but that's how it is here for most people.
Yeah. That's one thing we have talked about on the show before, is that people in Los Angeles will happily drive to a walkable place. So they go to Olvera Street to walk around, but then they park in a surface parking lot around there because they're like, well, how am I supposed to get to Olvera Street to do my walking around? Or they drive to City Walk and park, or they drive to Plaza del Valle and park, and like everything is a big surface parking lot that's attached to a walkable neighborhood.
I also remember, I was into cycling as a kid too. You would put your bikes on the car and drive to a nice place to ride your bike.
Yeah, right. I have neighbors that do that. No shade, but that's the only time I ever see their bikes is on the back of their SUV that they do. They drive up a mountain and they ride around, and then they come back and they drive everywhere when they're in the city.
I love when I can get exercise just doing my daily, whatever I have to do. I have to go to a meeting that's 5 miles away. I bike there, then I go to a market and bike there, then I bike, and you make these interesting, big circle routes from your day of going from this place to this place to this place to this place. And by the time you got home, you've done 20 miles and, you don't need to then go on an exercise ride. It's just sort of organically happened. I prefer that sort of situation. So you're not wasting time. You're using, that you're getting where you need to go and getting exercise at the same time.
Yeah, I can relate to that in that I was really into CrossFit heavily for a couple of years. And then when my commuting patterns changed, when I started working as a freelancer in the film industry, and a car free that way. So I'd, bike to set, bike to the bus stop, bike to the vendor's warehouse where I work for, that, I would do 2 or 3 hours of CrossFit a night back in the day. And then I found when I just started commuting by walking on the bike, and also, carrying my one wheel, carrying around like my big, heavy pack full of stuff. I actually don't need to work out that much to maintain the physical prowess that I achieved just by existing in LA without a car. This is great. I can go to the Y a couple of times a week, and then I still look and feel and perform the same way that I did when I was spending colossal amounts of time in the gym. So, hey, points to car-free living. Ben, I guess about your documentary, what do you hope people take away from it?
There's a few things. One is this notion that the status quo is not necessarily the best scenario. It's worth learning the history. How did we get what we've got? And is what made sense 50 years ago, does that still make sense today? Maybe things have changed. And also what's happening in the rest of the world. I think it's important for people to sort of broaden their horizons. I also don't have the answers, but I like to raise the question of just thinking about how does change happen? This is sort of a case study where we can see how change happened on this particular street, but it's not an easy question to answer. I think going into this, I thought the change happened in a more sort of organized, rational way where people were, really doing studies, and somehow that we had authority figures making the right choices. But now, at least in New York politics, and I have to think in a lot of cities, it's much more just about particular personalities, who's in power this year, what powerful business interests want something to happen or don't want something to happen. Is there a strong activist community in a neighborhood that's really fighting, or that people kind of just apathetic? All these things have to sort of weigh in, and I think it's interesting to study what things have resulted in change, and then it can that I think can inform you if you want to see change, about thinking strategically, what are the steps I should be taking to make it happen. The particular story of McGuinness, this street was created about 70 years ago from a small residential lane. It was widened dramatically, and the result was a fairly dangerous boulevard in which I heard one estimate is about a couple hundred people were probably killed over the decades in crashes, some in cars, some on foot, some on bikes. It took 70 years somehow for that status quo to be addressed. I mean, it was not acceptable from the very beginning, it was not working. Only now, and in part only because a very sort of beloved teacher was killed in 2021, that sort of rallied the community finally to be like, no, we really, really need to do something about this. but it took that long. And it would be nice if, if we find a way to start making progress that isn't built on tragedy, if we can, be much more proactive.
No, here, if 4 people are killed in like a high injury area, it's like then that triggers like a DOT study or something, I mean, it's so cynical, but it's like, and you go to neighborhood council meetings and people act like sometimes like, well, that's just the cost of living in a city, that's just the price of doing business. And then you want to show them, no, it doesn't have to be. And it's not in so many cities. And that's when you get but this isn't that city argument,
I have to think that the average person is a decent human being. I think they're just not very well informed. So I think we use the word accident. They just sort of accept it's an accident. No one was at fault. It's very sad, but oh well. I think I think we need things like documentaries and good leaders and stuff to explain things to them and show them like, no, there's a reason this happened. This was a result of design choices, and we have other alternatives, and we should really strongly be considering them, unless we want to continue to have these sort of problems.
Yeah, no, that reminds me too of like one of the things that you hear people say a lot in the movie is road diet, and that is the most common terminology for reconfiguring a street, but it frames it as a reduction of something, and people will talk about we lost lanes. So a lot of times like on Hollywood when they put in bike lanes, people said, we're down to just 2 lanes now. And I'm like, no, there's 2 bike lanes, 2 car storage lanes, a center turn lane, 2 general traffic lanes. We have more lanes now. It's a road buffet.
Yeah, pedestrian
we
buffet.
have options, and then, but once you hear it, road diet, and it's a real uphill battle to get people to think about it as a different.
True. There may be that's the kind of thing that again a good communicator would think about that carefully.
Yeah.
Because road diet, it just sounds like, well, you got to eat your veggies. We're taking away the fun stuff, and just gruel. Yeah, maybe we have some parting thoughts or whatever, or, if you want to say anything about the upcoming shows in Los Angeles.
Sure. So, the movie has been showing in festivals and sort of college screenings and for civic groups, but it's having its commercial theatrical run starting this Thursday, the 16th. But I think from the 13th to the 20th, it'll be in 4 Laemmle theaters in Southern California. I keep links to all the screenings on the website for the film, changinglanesdoc.com, DOC. And so you can find out there if you're in Southern California. It will then be streaming at some point on the big platforms, probably in the summer and more widely available. And also if you live in a city and would be interested in screening this film in your city, feel free to reach out to me on the website. I'd be thrilled to get it seen as broadly as possible.
Congratulations again on all of it. It's awesome work that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I've been very happy with the response it's been getting, and I think there's a fair amount of luck that I stumbled onto this great story. I also want to acknowledge, 3 main collaborators that really helped me get this film across the finish line. One was my editor, Kristen Bai, who really did a lot of, I think, is like half responsible for the finished movie, because weaving all of the history and the context and the story into sort of a coherent and entertaining whole was not easy. I had an archival producer, Prudence Arndt, who came up with a lot of that great historical footage. And finally, my music composer, Andrew Morocco, also did a wonderful job.
Well, and I should say, even though, our audience is obviously going to come to it probably mostly as interest in advocacy and that side of things, but it is entertaining as a film too, and like for film school people, like I don't know, it's very. I'm assuming that you like Frederick Wiseman because it's appeals. If you like stuff like Frederick Wiseman documentaries, you will like this. Even if you don't care about bike lanes or, just the community activism aspect of it, and just the meetings.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Again, to me, the point of making a movie like this is to have an effect, and I think, in a democracy, you've got to appeal to everybody. And most Americans live in cities, so most people should care about this stuff.
Here's a little coda about our thoughts on the film after Ben had to leave.
Well, one of the things I was really thinking about was just the psychology side of things, because I feel like, and maybe this will just sound biased, but I think that the bike lane advocates are upfront and honest about what they want. They want bike lanes because they want to be able to get to places in one piece on their bike. It's pretty straightforward. But I feel like the counter advocates they're never honest about it. They're like, this is about a colonization. This is about displacement with your bikes. This is about, I think some of them think it's just about annoying them with their bikes, or like just they're trying to get us out of our cars. Well, that's true. We're by giving you options that are like safe alternatives. But I think like I've never heard anyone say like, I don't know, all I care about is like convenient parking. And this might make it harder for me to find parking, and I'm willing to let a certain number of people get hit and killed or mangled if it means I can. And I'm sorry I have to say that, but that's just, I'm a psychopath.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any statistics to the amount of drivers who have been in a serious accident, and if that affects their willingness to drive afterwards. For me, being in, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe even 8, depending on if you count me backing into rocks and cracking my bumper as an accident. Like, I've been in a lot of accidents, and for me, I should not be driving this thing. It was just more information that, I shouldn't be in this car. This is not a safe way for me to get around. What is safe? I'm safer on a bike because I pay more attention. If I do hit someone, I am highly unlikely to severely injure them on a bike, unlike if I flatten someone with a car. I said this off mic before, but my big takeaway from the film when I saw it was just how fired up it got me. There's a chapter about Robert Moses, and whenever someone mentions the name Robert Moses, I immediately get my boxing gloves out.
I thought of you when Robert Moses came up.
Boy, I was so mad. And I just got to thinking, too, about how, for lack of a better word, ignorant a lot of drivers are. Like the story of downtown when you see Uber drivers and rideshare drivers just drive over a bollard or park right up to the edge of a bollard-protected bike lane so they can squeeze in another car behind them. And so then, like, you out on your bike have to go out into traffic and cut back in really quickly. Like, give it 2 feet.
I mean, my big thing is we need to reorganize the curb so that there is a delivery spot. And just be like, sorry, you got to lose a 72-hour parking spot and have like one that's just for 5 minutes, because a lot of people get stuff delivered. But I was also going to say, it's funny because, it makes you, the argument like, this isn't New York, though. This isn't New York. It's funny that New York invented, they made the first suburbs, Robert Moses invented putting freeways through the middle of neighborhoods. Like a lot of the stuff that we're saying, well, this is LA, it's not New York. It's like the worst things about Los Angeles sometimes are from New York too, the best, the better, and the worst. So,
I've been thinking, what can I do to prank these cars that park in the bike lanes? Do I crack an egg on the windshield? Do I put some shaving cream in there? Do I put some car dish
did you see on the automated on the buses, they have cameras that send out tickets, and it's generated like
$93 each.
And they've generated, I don't remember how many tens of millions of dollars of revenue in their first year, but I'm like, okay, so take all that revenue and invest it in putting cameras on every bike now, and just deputize all cyclists and be like,
I love that.
It just automatically sends, like, just click a little button, like, there's one in my bike lane, there's one in my bike, because people won't ride bike lanes. Like, this has been said before, I didn't come up with this or anything, but like the least safe route, like section of your route, that's how unsafe your route is. So people will be like, well, how come no one uses this bike lane? Like, there's one that goes to my house, but it ends at the end of the block, and then around the corner is where I was hit one of 3 times. And it's like, well, most people are just not going to put up with that because they're thinking, yes, there's a bike lane for like 10% of my commute, but the 90% where there's not it negates the fact that like 10% is safe.
Yeah. Ivy, what's your take on the film?
I think I really appreciated how Ben was able to portray like all different perspectives, because even earlier when we were asking him about his perspective and him showing the other side and stuff, he was like, there isn't really other side because he's just the film guy trying to like share a story. And I think that's how, even outside of mass transit, how I've been kind of more trying to like operate my life these days, where I'm like, okay, if I get really fired up about something, I'm going to try to consider what does the other side think, because if I go ham on them, then I'm just being just as bad. So I think it was it was very beautifully done in terms of like the cinematography, as well as showing like the emotions and the perspectives of all the sides. I will say though, like seeing them show the interviews where the opposers were like giving their opinions about why these McGinnis Boulevard changes shouldn't be a thing, I was like, no offense, you sound really stupid. I can't agree. I'm sorry.
You know what I'll say about that too, though, is that this is not a criticism of the film. This is just a kind of an observation about the way a lot of local politics works. New York is a white minority city, and so is Los Angeles. But those spaces are there are non-white people in it, but the advocate side and the people that are opposed it are dominated by white people. And I don't know how much of that's just like this sense of like, well, I belong in this neighborhood. I speak for this neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like but that's how it is. Like you go to a neighborhood council meeting in a mostly Latino neighborhood with a larger, an equally Asian-sized minority to a white minority. But it's going to be white people that are on the board usually. Mm-hmm. It's white people that show up to complain. It's white people that show up to advocate. And I don't know. I mean, some of it could just, we live in a time where it's also scary to be not white and stick your neck out. Where especially when sometimes there are representatives of the law enforcement at those meetings, like that make people, they make white people feel safe, but they make other people feel less safe sometimes.
Changing Lanes is screening on April 16th at 7 p.m. at the Laemmle Royal. That is the screening we're going to, so come hang out with us at the screening and after. On Saturday, April 18th, it is screening at the Town Center 5, Monica Film Center, and Glendale Laemmle Theaters. Those are all at 10 a.m. Is also screening at those same theaters on Sunday, and it is screening on Monday at the Town Center 5, Glendale, and Monica Film Centers, all at 7 p.m. Ivy would like to plug the Society of Women Engineers annual professional development conference, which is going to be held in DTLA at the ASU California Center, Broadway. One of the speakers is from LA Metro. The event is April 24th, and tickets are still available. Eric would like to plug a screening of Ed Ruscha's short film Elysian Park and the Stone Quarry Hills, which is April 18th at 11:30 a.m. at the Edendale Library. The film is narrated by Benicio del Toro, and it features Eric's words. However, the filmmakers did not ask Eric permission to use his words, but they did credit him and give him a free ticket. But his words are in there, so he's going to go.